Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids, and Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. Omari, we're recording this right after the NBA draft is finished. I don't know, it might still be going on. The second round still may be going on. I don't know. But it was a crazy night for our Detroit Pistons. We're going to get into all of that stuff. Let's just start. How are you feeling right now after the whirlwind that goes with your job and the trades and Jaden Ivey falling and everything that happened?
Yeah, I mean, my head is still spinning. Still have some work to get done tonight, and then they'll introduce the new guys, Ivey and Jalen tomorrow. And this is the peak part of the offseason. But tonight was a Troy Weaver special for sure. I know the Pistons were thrilled to get Jaden Ivey at number 5, just because he was, pretty strongly considered to be, the 4th best prospect in this draft, with a pretty steep fall off after. If you talk to most analysts, of course, the Pistons will say they may not have seen it that way, but the fact that their phones were ringing well after they made the pick, to see if Ivey was available, kind of tells the story of the drop off between him and that Keegan Murray Mathurin tier. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about all that, but my head is spinning, honestly, and I'm so wired right now, I may not fall asleep till 4 a.m.
I know, that's I'm feeling the same way. It's getting late. We're recording this, and I just know that I'm not going to be able to sleep even when we're done with it. You kind of called this, Omari. Like you said, 45% chance. You had a 45-45 between Keegan Murray and Jaden Ivey going number 4, leaving the other one for the Pistons. I thought it was more like a 20% chance for Keegan Murray, but Keegan Murray ended up going 4, and Jaden Ivey fell right into the Pistons and Troy Weaver's lap.
That's kind of was my sense, was that, the Kings were sort of a coin flip between them choosing between Murray and Ivey. And of course, there was always a chance that a trade would be there as well. There was some reporting that they were still working the phones up until that pick was in. But it always seemed like the Pistons would probably pick between Ivey and Murray. And then, of course, if Sacramento picked Ivey, I also thought that there was a chance that they would pick Mathurin. But, yeah, I mean, I think Ivey's reaction when his name was called by the Pistons kind of said it all. Earlier this week, he said he only worked out for Orlando and Detroit, which made his priorities pretty strong. Either I'm the number 1 pick or, I want to go to a place I call home. So for him to have that happen, we'll talk about the fit with Cade and everything else, which we've already talked about. But I just think the organization is happy to get a guy with such strong ties here. Mom played for the Shock. Dad was born here. Granddad played for the Detroit Lions. And then not only that, a guy who is, pretty clearly the best guard prospect in the entire draft, and just adds a dynamic to Detroit's offense that they just completely do not have right now, and arguably I've never had, or maybe not since. I don't even know how far back you'd have to go to find a point guard who is remotely as athletic as Jaden Ivey. I mean, if you call Grant Hill a point guard, maybe he's probably the last guy, honestly. So, overall, I think everybody, in the organization and from the Ivey family was just super thrilled and happy with how this turned out.
I know what I was doing during the draft and what I was a part of, it seemed like Pistons fans really hung on to the emotion of Jaden Ivey. And I'm sure part of it was just getting drafted and all of those things. But it did seem like he was very excited about becoming a Detroit Piston. And I know that means a lot to people. It means a lot to this organization and the fan base. We saw it last year with Cade, who immediately accepted that. And now you have this backcourt duo, and we will speak to how we think they will coexist on the court. But what may end up being your 2 franchise players both really want to play for the Pistons and be in Detroit. I think there's something to be said for that.
No doubt. I mean, the energy for the team right now is just very, very positive. We kind of saw the momentum from last year with Cade coming in and giving his team an entirely new identity. And then just the last 48 hours to move on from Jeremy Grant, opening up that cap space and getting that 2025 pick. And then that ends up becoming Ivey, who slipped, past Sacramento, and then Duren, who they traded for using that Milwaukee pick. You just kind of see sort of the overarching vision, I think, that this front office had. And I don't know if they knew that they would get Jalen Duren coming into today, but I mean, I'm probably all over the place right now, but can we just talk about just how much more athletic this team got?
Yeah, no, that's it. I was going to bring it up, and we're kind of trying to keep Ivy in segment 1, Duren in segment 2, but yeah, let's just talk about both of them. How, you said it perfectly, Jaden Ivey is explosive, first step. Jalen Duren is a rim running, explosive, lob threat, offensive rebounder, shot blocker, all these things. Like, this team got crazy more athletic, especially compared to how it could have gone. So I don't know. Like, I wonder, I would love to know if Troy Weaver was like that the goal of the draft, or did they just like Ivy and Duren and it kind of fell that way, or were they purposely trying to put an infusion of athleticism into this roster? Because it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just worked out that way. I knew that they liked Duren. I didn't know if they would have a chance to get him, but I kind of tweeted it earlier. But when I did 5 players to watch, at the NBA Draft Combine that I wrote right before I left for Chicago a month ago, I had Jaden Ivey, Shaedon Sharpe, Benedict Mathurin, who am I forgetting? Keegan Murray, like the guys who I thought were in the mix at number 5. And then Jalen Duren, because I was like, if they were going to get a late first round or late lottery pick, I just felt like Duren was probably going to be the guy. So they clearly, I think, prioritized athleticism. It wasn't clear if they'd be able to do it just because you didn't know which direction Sacramento was going to get to. And there's a pretty fun what if, Sacramento goes Jaden Ivey and the Pistons end up with Murray, then do they still trade, into the back half of the lottery and go for a guy like a Johnny Davis or whoever? That's a fun what if. But no, they got so much more athletic. I mean, Jalen Duren is, he's also one of the most athletic centers in the draft. You watch him play and you kind of see shades of Dwight Howard just with his rim running and lob threat. He's so young, like he'll still be 18 years old when the draft starts. Like we spent so much time talking about how old Keegan Murray is, and they end up with a guy who's going to be 18 years old, when the season starts. He doesn't turn 19 until November, which is just insanely young. So yeah, like this team's going to look a lot different next season. Like they added 2 guys who completely changed the dynamic of their offense and potentially their defense as well. And if you want to augment Cade Cunningham, with guys who provide what he doesn't, then you want athletes around him, right? Along with Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart, who obviously are jumping out the gym as well. So yeah, I mean, they just checked a lot of boxes tonight. Like I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all, but they really went out and got 2 guys who are high on their draft board and changed the complexion of this team.
Yeah, and that's what I say. Like, if you draft Keegan Murray and Johnny Davis, you walk away from that draft maybe happy or content with that and excited, but it's not the same level of athleticism that we're talking about with Ivy and with Jalen Duren. I do have to ask, because I know, again, I was part of the live feed that was going on. We were freaking out because it was like, as soon as Jaden Ivey was selected, the reports started coming out that the Knicks were going to throw the kitchen sink at the Pistons to try to get him from Detroit. And then it was like Jalen Duren, and he was actually selected. Like, it was all over the place. Were there any inclination that Jaden Ivey may have been on the move? Because I don't think so. It doesn't seem that way. But did you get that vibe at all that teams may have had a chance of really taking him from the Pistons?
I do think Detroit would have moved him if the right offer came along. Okay. And that had to have been, I think it would have had to have been a really good haul for him. And obviously that deal never came. But I do think that there was a window after they took him where it was like, probably not, but we'll just see how this sort of unwinds. And then as the process went on, it was like, okay, no, like absolutely not. So it was probably unlikely the entire time. But when you take a guy like Ivy, the phones start blowing up because you have a lot of teams that sense whatever guy we get, he's not going to be a Jaden Ivey, right? I think it's natural to kind of weigh your options and listen to what's out there. The deal never came. So, of course, they were just like, we're just not going to move him. We're going to keep him. He was high on our draft board. He wants to be here. It would have taken a really, really good trade to kind of pry him off of our hands. But no, I do think there was a window where it was a possibility for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when I kept hearing the Knicks and the people I were talking with, we were trying to put a trade together. I'm like, no, there's not much the Knicks could offer the Pistons where I would be excited if all of a sudden it came across and Jaden Ivey was getting traded to the Knicks for whatever they could put together. And we'll talk about the trade that ended up happening in just a second that brought Jalen Duren, and the Jeremy Grant trade that we haven't talked about yet on the podcast. That's happened since our last episode. Let's stick with Jaden Ivey here for just a few more minutes. We've talked about it some, Omari, but do you have any concerns with the backcourt pairing of Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey?
Yes, I think it's just hard to build around a guard who is an elite athlete, could get downhill, but isn't a great passer or shooter. And we've said that, but Jaden's going to have to be able to knock down, catch, and shoot threes, and he's going to have to defend. And he's going to have to, he doesn't have to be Ja Morant as a passer, but just if you do drive downhill, you got to recognize, which guys are open, kick to the corner or dump off to Duren or Stewart or whoever. Like, you got to be able to make those reads consistently. And I think he can get there, but he probably won't be that player right off the bat, which is fine. The Pistons don't need to rush this process. With that said, and I was talking to Sean Windsor, Freep columnist, at the practice facility earlier, and I said, we talk so much about what Jaden Ivey can't do, but at the end of the day, this guy's got an all-time great first step and, an all-time great bounce. And maybe we're complicating it. Maybe, he's going to draw so much attention at the rim that it'll just kind of work itself out. Russell Westbrook wasn't a point guard when he was at UCLA, but he gets into the league and nobody can stay in front of him. He could dunk on anybody. And the passing just kind of comes because when you're drawing 2 or 3 guys every time you drive to the rim, why wouldn't you kick it out, And he gets to the point where he's averaging 10 assists a game. I'm not saying that Jaden Ivey's Russell Westbrook, but there is precedent for athletic guards coming into the league and, you focus on, their worst and whatnot. But the NBA game, in a lot of ways, I think it's simpler than college. Just a lot of drive and kick. And when you're athletic, things are going to open up for you. And particularly when you have a guy in Cade Cunningham who does everything, and you already have some shooting with, Sadiq Bey, and, I'm sure they'll find some shooters in free agency. Isaiah Stewart might shoot a little bit better next season. Some stuff is just going to come naturally to Jaden Ivey, and he just may be a guy where, what are we even thinking about? He's going to blow by everybody. He's a great athlete. He's strong. You don't have to be Chris Paul with the ball. You just have to be a good enough passer, and you still have a playmaker next to him who can do a lot. So he's got to get better, but I think you just talk about fit. This is just more about talent. You have Cade Cunningham, and you just got the best guard prospect in the draft. So you just draft him, you figure it out. And it's not like Jaden Ivey can't shoot. It's not like he can't pass. So he's already got the base to build on.
I've said I don't think it's the best fit next to Cade Cunningham, but Cade's so good, I don't think you have to have the best fit. But I think it's the best fit for Jaden Ivey, in my opinion. I think, and I don't know if this is why he only worked out for the Magic and the Pistons, and that's why he wanted to go to Detroit so much. But I think pairing him next to a guy like Cade Cunningham really makes his life easier, and he can just do all the things you talked about, which is what he does best. I also would be remiss not to mention that, you keep saying they got the best guard in the draft. So when we talked and told people it's okay when the Pistons fell to number 5 on the draft lottery night, it really ended up being okay, Omari. Yes, would we be more excited if we were talking about Chet or Jabari or Paolo? Sure, but they still got Jaden Ivey, the best guard in the draft. And so that fall in the lottery, a month ago or 2, whenever that was, didn't end up being just like the end of the world.
Yeah, and that's why, when fans freak out about stuff, it's always just let's just let the process play out first. Or even you saw fans kind of freak out about the Jeremy Grant trade, because I think fans like trades that bring back things that are tangible. Draft picks are tangible, players are tangible, and cap space is not tangible. It's just potential. And I guess the way you feel about that kind of comes down to how much you trust the front office to make good use of it. But yeah, in any draft, the 5th pick is a good pick. There's never a scenario where the 5th pick is not a good pick. Look at any draft and you see multiple guys who go 5 or later who end up becoming above average, if not star NBA players. And you only need one team in front of you to make a bad pick. I think Trae Young in 2018 was the 5th pick, right? And there's probably 2 guys above him who you look back and it's if you redo that, those guys definitely don't go up there. So, yeah, best case scenario for the Pistons, obviously, to get Jaden Ivey at 5. I don't think you could have scripted that better.
And he's got some things to work on. I think more than anything offensively, I want to see him improve his mid-range game and get better there. And then the defensive questions, guarding on the ball, getting lost off the ball at times. But those are things that guys are going to come in with and he's going to improve on and get better. And we'll break his game down even more on Tuesday. We'll still drop an episode on Tuesday for everybody listening. So we don't want to get into the weeds too much. We just wanted to give our instant recap and reactions to the draft. We're going to take a short break, but you just brought up the Jeremy Grant trade, and we're going to talk about the other first-round pick the Pistons were able to acquire, partly because of that trade, after this break.
All right, hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Smiles, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Benares.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
Oh, we're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. Arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some Free Press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
All right, guys, we're back to talk about the Jeremy Grant trade, and more specifically, Jalen Duren, the young center out of Memphis who was high on Detroit's draft board. And I just think he is very exciting. And I think, I'm still, thinking about all the work I have to do tonight and map it out the next few days. But he has a chance to be the steal of the draft as well. He went 13 back end of the lottery. But, for a guy who's 18, just great rim protection instincts, like just great athlete, extremely strong. And you kind of watch Robert Williams in the finals, and he was playing with like a bum knee, but he could just still impact the game in so many ways. Those types of centers are still very impactful in the NBA, no matter where you get them in the draft. And I think Troy Weaver's kind of coveted a center like that. And they're not very easy to get, right? You only have a few of them in every draft. So for Troy to be able to get it tonight, I think Jaden Ivey, of course, is the highlight of the night, being the 5th pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if deep down Troy is a little bit more excited that he was able to get Duren with the 13th pick, because Jalen Duren is, I think, just checks every box that Troy likes in centers. And a few years from now, I think that pick could really, really, really become something.
I mean, we talk about floors and ceilings all the time, right, Amar? I think Jalen Duren's floor is pretty impressive because at the very least, he's going to be this super athlete. We've said it multiple times now in 15, 16 minutes that catches lob, picks and rolls, runs the floor, protects the rim. I think he's going to be a good rim protector. I think he's switchable. I think there's a chance for him to be switchable, which now that gets super exciting if you have him and Isaiah Stewart, if one, probably by Isaiah Stewart developing a shot more than Jalen Duren. But that's a really exciting defensive combination there as well. But that's the floor. Offensively, if he does develop any sort of shot, or I watched the Houston game, Omari, and he had some really, really high-level passes in the short roll ball screen situation. It didn't show up in every film, but in that one it did against a good defense. If that stuff comes around, now you're talking about an even higher level of player. So, you say Troy Weaver may be going to bed tonight more excited about Jalen Duren than Jaden. I might be. I'm excited about Jaden Ivey, but I'm juiced that they also got Jalen Duren.
No doubt. You mentioned the passing, and he's so young. This dude is 18 years old. He is, we talk about Shaedon Sharpe not playing a college game and how young he is, but Jalen Duren is younger than Shaedon Sharpe. I think Troy said after we talked to him an hour ago that Duren was the youngest player in the draft. And I knew he was one of the youngest, but he might be the youngest player in the draft. He doesn't turn 19 until November. I don't know which guy is younger than that. So his trajectory is just insane. And 2 years from now, you really start to see him put some things together. And I want to talk about his fit with Isaiah Stewart, too, because we really did see Isaiah Stewart make a leap last season just as a guy who could stick with guys in the perimeter. And if he can knock down threes like a 35% clip, which I do think he'll eventually be able to do, that could be a suffocating front court defensively, absolutely suffocating.
And then if you add Jaden Ivey, if just the athleticism of him, the length of Cade Cunningham, you play Killian in there every once in a while, and then it's not bad offensively still. That's what's exciting about all of it. We're talking about fit, so I got to ask this, what do you think this means for DeAndre Ayton? And we'll talk about the Jeremy Grant trade more in just a second, but after that trade, everybody's oh, they're definitely going for DeAndre Ayton. I think there was everything was reporting Pistons all in on DeAndre Ayton now. I don't know that they're completely out on DeAndre Ayton because of Jalen Duren, but do you think it changes that at all?
Yeah, I don't think they're completely out, but I think if you just look at the best use of your cap space, sure, you can still offer it back to Ayton, but not that they're probably going to buy out Kemba Walker. So that eats it to the cap a little bit. I still got to sit down and crunch all the numbers because I haven't even had a chance to do that. But Ayton definitely takes up more of the cap than he would have on a max deal this morning. And you look at it like, okay, we have Isaiah Stewart, we have Jalen Duren. Do we need to invest that much money in another center? Even if Ayton obviously is, he would probably come in and immediately be, a top 2 player on the team from a talent standpoint. I don't know if the incentive to make that type of move is as strong as it was previously. You have Duren, you have Isaiah Stewart.
Marvin Bagley. Kelly Olynyk is still on the roster. Yeah, I mean, that's already a pretty crowded front court. And I know we've seen Troy Weaver stockpile centers a couple of years ago, but that was more of a process thing and less of we wanted to play 6 centers, at any given game. So, I'm not going to say that they're completely out on Ayton, but maybe the incentive to trade for him isn't as strong as it was previously. I know Troy Weaver said the other day that the draft didn't or wasn't going to dictate their free agency, but I can't help but think about this, Omar. You take Jaden Ivey. That probably means you're not going to go after Jalen Brunson, Colin Sexton, or Anthony Simons. You draft Jalen Duren. That might mean that you don't go after DeAndre Ayton. Like, Troy Weaver can say whatever he wants. I feel like because the draft went this way, which maybe was the home run for Troy Weaver, it's going to end up affecting what they do and how they spend their money in free agency.
To an extent, yes. Like Troy said, it won't. But, I think when you end up with Ivy, Jalen, who filled 2 pretty big needs on the roster, but also 2 highly athletic, high upside guys, maybe you shift your strategy more to, just what do we need at this point? We have our young core in place. We've made 6 first-round picks in the last 3 years. So how do we just help these guys get to like that next step? You already have Corey Joseph. He's back on the player option. Kelly Olynyk. I actually asked Troy, do you bring in more vets at this point, just because your roster's so young? And he kind of joked. We could bring in a 23-year-old and he'd be a vet, right? But yeah, I think the clear lead on this roster is shooting, because you made 2 first-round picks tonight, and now there are those guys shoot. DeAndre Ayton does not shoot. Colin Sexton can shoot pretty well, but he's probably going to run you $20-25 million. There's just probably better ways to use that cap, and it would not surprise me if the Pistons approach the summer with the mindset of, instead of one big splash, we're going to get some key role guys and some guys who can really shoot it, because that's what we need. And you can sign them to short-term or flexible deals, and you can kind of roll that flexibility forward to next offseason when maybe you could make a bigger splash.
That's exactly what Keith Smith came on and said on the podcast, right? Was like, you don't have to go for these big fish. You can maybe overpay just a little bit, but it's not an overpay if it's only for 1 year. And I think that's what fans need to keep in mind is maybe they give a guy $15 million that we all think should only get 10. Well, it's only for a year. It's okay. Like you said, we'll roll that cap space over to the next year. Part of the reason they have so much cap space was because of the Jeremy Grant trade. I know this was all about the draft, but 24 hours ago, Wes said it before the recording. It doesn't seem like it was only 24 hours ago. The Pistons traded Jeremy Grant in what seemed like a less than value trade, but as it's all worked itself out, Jeremy Grant eventually became the number 13 pick of Jalen Duren, some second-round picks, and still cap space, even after taking on the Kemba Walker contract. I mean, when you think about 2 summers ago, Troy Weaver signed Jeremy Grant to a deal that nobody thought was any good, and now he's turned him into this. Like, maybe Weaver knows what he's doing.
Maybe. Because here's the thing. Even if they had traded... Even if they had gotten that number 7 pick from Portland, that number 7 pick still might have become Duren.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like, a pick is a pick, but I think Troy got the player he wanted. So at the end of the day, you flip, Grant for, the player Troy wanted, an additional cap. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So yeah, I didn't think the Jeremy Grant trade was bad, because I just think getting the pick and flexibility is always good. Like, regardless of what the theoretical best option was, a lot of times what is realistic in theory is not the actuality. A day later and you get Duren and Cap, I mean, I would say that's probably close to the best case scenario for Jeremy Grant, who is a good player, useful player, proven player, but also never made an all-star team. So, a guy like that is probably closer to the Robert Covington tier prospect than maybe what some would have expected him to get back. So, yeah, overall, I think the process for this was really good.
Yeah, and you got to think that Weaver probably had an idea that this trade would be in place if he made the Grant trade to Portland, taking on the money. And that I do want to say that 2025 first did end up going. I think it's in Charlotte now. Again, we'll break that stuff down a little bit more on Tuesday whenever we have an hour episode to get into all of it. And maybe we've all had a little bit more sleep than whenever we do right now. Summer League is going to be so much fun, Omari. I couldn't help but think about this. I don't know what current guys on the roster are going to play, but the Pistons may have the most exciting team. We've been talking about athleticism. Me and you are going to be out there. Pistons have the primetime game on Thursday night, the first night. So I think this is just 2 weeks away is Summer League out in Vegas. And we're going to get to see Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren up.
Yeah, that pick and roll has a potential to be absolutely devastating. I mean, yeah, they got if you're ranking the top 5 athletes in this draft, the Pistons got 2 of them. So I didn't even think about their summer league team, but yeah, you have Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. I'm sure Isaiah Livers will be out there.
Livers, who will be a nice player. They'll have a nice little squad. I don't anticipate those guys end up playing, in every single game because that's kind of how we see those things go. But just in terms of entertainment value, that's a lot of entertainment for one team with those 2 guys.
Oh, that's a lot of entertainment. Yeah, no, I'm super excited for that. I didn't even think about that until now. That's a really exciting team.
Yes, sir. All right. You got anything else from tonight? Any other thoughts? I know you got an article you got to finish up. We got some other things we got to clean up before we go to bed. And then I'm sure there'll be all sorts of stuff to unpack Friday throughout the weekend. And then again, guys, we will be back on Tuesday. We wanted to dedicate ourselves to this, get an episode out to you first thing Friday morning. So we appreciate you listening, supporting the podcast. We'll be back on Tuesday with a little extra sleep, man. Omari, thank you so much for saying it. I hope you guys understand how busy this man was tonight and how much more work he has to do. And so I know I appreciate the fact that he took the time to do this, and I hope you guys do as well.
No, for sure. Our general assignment sports reporter, Tony Garcia, who was at the practice facility tonight, he would say, I think I looked up from my phone for 3 hours straight. I was just constant, just trying to stay on top of everything. I would say draft night with Troy Weaver is always going to be an insanely busy night because you just don't know what's quite going to happen. But he very clearly relishes these moments to kind of flesh the team out. And yeah, I mean, you just look at his resume. You have 6 first-round picks in 3 years. 3 of those guys so far have made an all-rookie team. And, I'm sure Duren and Ivy will have a good chance next year as well. So, it's just exciting. As a reporter, I think you always want some excitement. You want to cover a team that people are interested in. And this is the 3rd straight draft where Pistons fans are doing backflips because a lot of boxes got checked. So, I'm glad we got to record this pod tonight. And and then next week, free agency, and then the week after that, Summer League. So it's just going to be a lot of excitement, a lot to talk about over the next few weeks. So again, thank you everybody for listening. Didn't do an outline for this episode. We kind of just winged it. So I hope I do the proper shout outs at the end. But thanks to Antoinette Delgado, Carrie Jr. second, and actually Carrie's out tonight. Our intern is doing the pod.
Yes, definitely shout out Pavi, the summer intern at the Detroit Free Press, who's staying up late with us, getting this out for you guys Friday morning. Huge thank you to her.
Absolutely. And then also shout out to Kirkland Crawford, who stayed up tonight to see everything go down. And the Free team as a whole, everybody helped up with draft coverage. And then last but certainly not least, our man Wes, who was on with the pod as well. And we'll get him into the fold. So good night, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.